Lawrence Neal here, and welcome back to High Intensity Business, the podcast where we discuss high intensity strength training and provide you with tools, tactics, and strategies to grow your strength training business. This is episode 325. Today's guest is Jeff Casebolt. Jeff is the director of biomechanical research for Dynavec Multi-Directional Resistance Systems. Dynavec creates exercise machines that work in multiple planes to train the body. In today's episode, we're going to be getting an update on Dynavec business, which has been growing really fast. I'm fascinated to hear what the latest is regarding Dynavec. We're going to be recapping the benefits of the popular Gluteator machine and how to program workouts. And then we're going to be exploring the application of the Dynavec ankle system and torso system machines. Jeff, great to speak to you again. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, Jeff, it's been a while, and I know you and I just had a little bit of talk off air, but I'm just really keen to understand your journey over the last sort of 18 months or so, because obviously we've been through a lot in terms of COVID and how that's impacted the industry. But you guys have been growing really fast, and it's been so much interest in your fantastic machine. So I'd just love to hear an update on what life's been like for you guys over the last couple of years.
Thanks. I think if you go back to 2019, we definitely turned a corner. People started to recognize the value within the weight room. Different aspects or realms of strength training started to embrace the concept. And then, we were super excited by the end of 2019 with regards to we didn't have to fight to get people to understand what the machine did. More and more people were starting to see its value. So when we started 2020, we were in a good position. We had a lot of inquiry. We had a waiting list started. And then obviously, mid-March 2020, everything kind of came to a screeching halt. And what we decided to do as a business was just to email everyone or communicate to everyone that was on our waiting list. Like, if you want a Gluteator now, we will work with you to make that happen. If you want to wait until this whole COVID circumstance is behind us, let us know. Or if you want us to just completely remove you from our waiting list, let us know. And we were terrified. It was scary, and it as many of you know that, my day job was as a professor. So at the same time I'm going through that transition, I'm also trying to figure out how to be an online teacher literally within 4 days. And that was a difficult transition. So, life was chaotic for quite a bit. And then a really kind of cool thing happened is that there were several people that took advantage of the opportunity. And by the end of 2020, we were in a better position than we were at the end of 2019, which was not anticipated. We ended up in a more sales, better position. We took the time to really educate, work with people. It was not easy by any stretch of the means, but it was also gratifying because it was very focused in what we needed to take care of to sustain or weather the storm, so to speak. And so by the end of 2020, we felt pretty good. And then early 2021, it was time to make that leap. I stepped away from teaching altogether and full-time Dynavec now. And we are in the process of growing our other products and trying to figure out a way to keep Gluteator at the forefront of a conversation in terms of its impact and value within the different realms of strength training. And, today, the next wave of Plantaris, our ankle system, are going to be released. And we're looking forward to, what the end of 2020, what 2022 is going to bring us.
Help me understand then. I love to hear that you had a more successful end to 2020 than you did in 2019, which, as you said, was unexpected. So why do you think that is? Were you getting a lot more, home orders for equipment, or was there just a spike to make up for any shortfall during the time where, gyms were closed?
Yes to both. To be honest with you, yes to both. And to be honest with you, our home businesses went from about 18 to 20% of our total sales to over 25, between 25 and 30% of our total sales. So the home gym, the people that were like, that realized that this machine had some sort of value for them personally, whatever that happened to be. And they were making these online purchases. And as you know, that you can buy refurb, equipment pretty good. I mean, much cheaper than it was originally sold for many of the pieces, not all of them, but for many of the pieces. And then our machine, and we know this, it's usually the cherry on top. It's usually one of the last pieces that people get because it's specific, it's highly specific, and it's more of a complementary or accessory lift for most individuals. There are some that it's primary in the sense they need to get their glutes strong before they're able to, move on to a compound movement or a complex movement, in the sense that we don't load the back of the knees and we can get the glutes strong. So it just depends on the client. But yeah, the home business definitely jumped by probably more than 10% of our total sales. And then there was also people that realized like they could sneak in and get their machine much quicker. They had the money already allocated and they felt like they were going to weather the storm of COVID, because the original projections of how long it was going to take. And, that whole discussion is open because different parts of the world have handled this differently. Right. But here in Texas, we were shut down for only a few weeks, months, and then we were back open for business. And so the combination of those two kept us afloat. And then ultimately by the end of it, when we looked at numbers. Now, when I say we had a better 2020 to 2019, it wasn't significantly better. It just happened to be a little bit better, but it was surprising because we were not anticipating those numbers.
Yeah. And what do you think is the sort of primary activity that's driving you sales? Do you think it's mostly word of mouth now, or I know in the beginning I remember it was there were some really helpful influencers I think on social media that helped. But just curious what you think is sort of driving the growth.
And I can sum this up best. We went to a Europa Dallas 2 years in a row. And the first year we went, people walked by the machine and looked at it and said, "What the hell is that?" And then the second year they're like, oh, that's that machine. And then the third year they knew the name. So we went 3 years consecutively over 2 year span, right? And so just that evolution is what's happened. And a lot of that is education and marketing. And people being open to the idea that you can actually sit on your bottom and strengthen your glutes was kind of foreign to a large percentage of the strength industry. There's still, squats and lunges and deadlifts and hip hinging and all the other ways that we can work. What people didn't realize is that the combination of extension through the hip with abduction actually does something to your glutes that is unique, that is difficult to reproduce anyway, anyhow. And we've seen several people try, and different companies have released different, not infringing on our patent, but definitely tried to get some level of taxation from multiple directions because the glute is what it is in terms of the complex. So to answer your question, I think for most people, there is this word of mouth of, okay, this machine is legitimate. Like it is something that can enhance and will enhance. And I've been privileged since the last time you and I spoke. We've had some purchases that kind of caved into that popularity and then have realized why this machine can stand alone and is holding its own in this industry. If that makes sense.
It does. So let's move on to just recapping the Gluteator, because I don't think we can do a podcast without talking about it a little bit, just to remind people what the Gluteator is, how it works, the benefits it provides, but then also explain that to people who are coming across you and Dynavec for the first time. And obviously, if people want to go into more detail about Jeff and Kent and the history of the company, then please listen to not part one, but our first podcast, which will be in the show notes. So do you want to just give a quick overview of the Gluteator, Jeff, and we'll start there?
Yes, sir. The Gluteator was born from looking at a textbook. So for those people who don't actually use textbooks anymore, don't open them at all, and I'm speaking to my former students, sarcasm. But the point is that looking at the glutes and the angle of the fiber direction for the average individual, being able to create two planes of resistance, it works with a plane that would be directly involved with the fiber direction. And that's one of the advantages of our machine specifically for the glutes. Also, if you go back, to Arthur Jones and you reference Arthur's bulletins and you dig into them and really read them, there's scientific gold in there. I mean, a lot of his bulletins are, kind of more his thoughts and they're more like notes than they are anything else, in my opinion. But a lot of what he's saying in there's scientific backing that has been proven in today's day and age, and it's investigated. One of the things he does mention in chapter 2 is the idea of bidirectional resistance and motor unit recruitment. So Kent is a big, advocate of Arthur Jones, followed him, religiously when he was a young man, and anything that Arthur put out, Kent pretty much read it and embraced it. And so, to Kent's credit, he took the idea of bidirectional resistance and applied it to the hip first, with the intent of increasing motor unit recruitment, with the idea that muscle fiber activation. And that's ultimately kind of what sets us apart. So what I tell people about the Gluteator is for your glutes, like the leg extension machine is for your quadriceps. So anybody that's never used it, when you walk away from a leg extension, an aggressive set of leg extension, your quads are pretty pumped, fatigued, blah, 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 if you've really gone for it. If you do the same thing on our machine, it's exactly the same feeling, but it's isolated to your glute complex. And most people who've ever really challenged themselves in a weight room can relate to that concept. Then what's really fun is if you take that concept and now walk into, sitting as the new smoking, or athleticism, or the aesthetics market, and or therapeutic, you start going into the different realms of science or strength training, the science of strength training. You realize that this piece, this one machine, is relevant in more than one area of strength training. And that's kind of how it was born, or that's how it was started, was just this concept. And then we built it. And then, or Kent built it, I tested it. And then as we move forward, I was like, there's something here. It's going to be difficult to educate the general public on this, but it's going to be a bumpy road, but it'll be worth it once people start to buy in or understand conceptually what it's trying to do. And like I said, I mean, that's definitely outlined in our first opportunity to sit down and chat. But that's kind of an overview of how we got started. And then from there, we started looking or examining the possibility of this same technology moving to different parts of the body. We decided that the ankle was probably the next place to go. And then we moved on from there in different ideas and concepts.
So ultimately, the Gluteator provides hip extension and hip abduction at the same time, hence the multi-directional component. And we'll put a link to the Gluteator into a video demo in the blog post for this, as I'm sure people who aren't aware of it want to be able to see it in action and see some video footage there. So we'll do that. I think you did a great job there, just explaining how it works, the benefits, really focusing on the glute musculature. One thing I don't think we talked about before, Jeff, is just talking about programming, sequences, protocols. I'd love, because obviously, as you know, my audience are mostly strength studio owners, that kind of thing, people that are really into high intensity training. So I'd love to learn about what you see as in our space as being really effective ways to use the Gluteator in terms of overall programming. So I don't know, like maybe we can start with protocols. Do you tend to advocate a certain cadence, like maybe a 2-4 or a 6-6 or a 10-10 or anything like that?
Tempo is key. and a little bit of weight goes a long way, is usually what I first tell people right off the bat. If you are creating high rates of angular momentum, in other words, you're exploding into the machine, there's a point in time where your neurological recruitment is more focused on the deceleration. And because we have a rubber stopper and everything at the terminal end of the movement, a lot of people, when they first get on there, try to jump on the machine, so to speak. And so we believe in tempo, the idea of controlling momentum, not letting it get out of control, which works specifically with the body a little bit better in the sense that the glutes are primarily type 1 fibers. We want to make sure that they're being activated through the entire range of motion of the machine. The machine's activation range of motion is down around close to 90 degrees of hip flexion, which is an important part for transfer, say, within the gym to other compound movements that require, say, squatting or lunging or deadlifting. So it's a complementary piece if done properly. Then, from there, once we get that kind of strength developed, then we can start to play with different protocols. But the first thing that people do is they put on a weight that they say normally do with the abduction machine, and they realize quickly that that's not going to be the case. There is a little bit of a learning curve to the machine. In other words, it's almost like rub the belly, pat the head. You've got to learn to push at 2 different points. But people who know their body very, very well pick up on that pretty quickly. We've had some novices that have really never strength trained before, and it's a bit of work. I mean, you gotta really coach them through that process to where they go, oh, those are my glutes. And visually, when you get somebody on the machine, you can watch facial expressions and almost tell instantly when their glutes start to fire, because they're like, wait, that's different. And so, for us, that's I usually focus on tempo and reduction of load until they understand the movement pattern. And then once we get past that initial part, then we can really start playing with some more, for lack of a better way of saying, advanced techniques in terms of getting that glute to closer and closer to fatigue. Fair enough?
Yeah, I mean, advanced techniques, I would think are sometimes, well, yeah, if you didn't get to muscle failure on an initial set or group of sets, depending on your philosophy, advanced techniques can be thrown in, I guess, to help someone get to muscle failure and drive that deep level of fatigue. Or in some cases, some people might want to go beyond that. I'm not advocating that, just saying that's sometimes some people's preference. So what kind of advanced things are we talking about? We're talking about things like static holds, very, very slow negatives, maybe assisted reps, that kind of thing?
So the very first thing that I work on is can you control it at the distal range of motion? Can you create that isometric hold that you're speaking of, and being able to hold it in that position? And you don't need a whole lot of weight on the machine to be able to, it'll light you up on fire. But it's, once you kind of get there, and then I'll get people that get so proficient at that we start adding some, eccentric loading through the eccentric phase. Well, what I'll do is kind of stand to the side of the machine, and as they hold it isometrically, then I'll put my foot on the crossbar or my hand on the weight horn, and I'll just start adding a little bit more tension in the eccentric than they're getting in the concentric. And that seems to, bring about some, 4-letter words and real funny facial expressions, because we're not used to our glutes being isolated, because usually when you work your glutes, it's in combination with other segments of your body. So when it's purely isolated like this, it's an uncomfortable feeling until you get used to it or embrace it as part of a new training protocol. But mostly how I advocate the machine is one of 2 ways. The very first way that I typically talk to people about is as a finisher. So in other words, if I take any athlete or any client through a workout, then I can usually throw them on a Gluteator, and I still have to work pretty hard to take their glutes to failure, to muscular failure, right? what I call MVF, momentary volitional fatigue. Once they understand that, there's still something left in their tank. And I don't care how many, whatever your philosophy is, whatever other exercises that are glute specific, I know for a fact that I can still get you on the Gluteator and get a really aggressive set to failure because there's something left there. Does that make sense? However you want to describe that. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. But it sounds like where you're going with this is that you like it to be a finisher in a workout. So you like maybe in the context of an entire workout, someone's done other leg movements and maybe the Gluteator is the final leg piece, potentially?
That's one way that we usually typically get people used to or acclimated to it. So if you're, if you say, I'm getting my glutes on, I don't know, squatting or leg press or whatever in a compound movement, I know for a fact that if we throw the Gluteator on top as the cherry, right? If we know that, then I'm going to take somebody to a place of fatigue through their glutes, which is highly specific, and it's different. But then we've had amazing transfer with power lifters in the bottom part of their squats. The other way that I love to use this machine is actually as kind of a pre-activator. In other words, get the glutes activated where it's that isolated contraction, and then immediately move to their favorite compound lift. And you just see slight postural changes, but then you also see that they can feel their glutes contracting a little bit more, say on that leg press or that squat or that lunge or the deadlift even. And that is very client specific. That one's not as general. I know the finisher is more of a general. I can get pretty much anybody. The pre-activator, that's real specific in terms of their knowledge of their body, how long they've been training, what their intent is. That one's a little bit more specific, but I break that out for people that don't feel their glutes during the other compound movements. And it's been fun to see how they light up with like, oh my gosh, I've never felt my glutes during that movement, that compound movement before.
And I guess if you were activating it, then maybe you wouldn't necessarily go to muscle failure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Because I'm thinking if you did a Gluteator to failure before a leg press, for example, it's almost like a pre-exhaust. So it makes the leg press more challenging.
Yes. And we've had, that's a great question. We've had people literally do the pre-exhaust because they want to isolate the quadriceps a little bit more on us. I mean, that's more bodybuilding 101 type things, or going back to the work of Arthur Jones. Pre-exhausting with a pullover before you do a pull down, that type of thing. But I just like, if you give me a weight that you can do 15 reps and do say 10 to 12 reps with it, then jump into your favorite compound lift. It's the realization that your glutes are either active or contributing is I'm still trying to figure out how much of that is physiological, physical, or conversely to that, psychological. You just feel like it's working. Does that make sense? So the actual contribution is still open for debate, but I do know that if the brain goes there, the body's likely to follow. And that's not for me to educate everybody on that, but I'm not 100% sure that answer. Does that make sense? And then to be able to test, go ahead.
It does. I was just going to say, it sounds like from what you said there, and I think previous conversations, the jury's out on some of those things. But what is interesting, and this is something actually Luke and I talk about a lot, is the importance of, and this is more down to adherence and the business and keeping the client, is how important the feel of a workout is. Even if, and I'm not saying this is true, but even if certain single joint exercises, a Gluteator, didn't offer any additional benefit in terms of strength or muscle hypertrophy of the glute, I'm not saying it does, I'm just saying just a hypothetical, just the feeling it gives, right, is very valuable. If a client feels a very different sensation from that particular exercise, then they're going to get more excited about their workouts. And I think then they're more likely to stick around. And the same is true for any single joint movement. I know there's, lots of research out comparing single joint to multi-joint. And, for example, for like single joint bicep and tricep work versus multi-joint bicep and tricep work, and there being no significant difference in outcomes for like strength and hypertrophy. But the point is that most guys like to leave the gym with an enormous muscular pump in their bicep, right? And they want to feel that pump. And so there's something to be said for the feel. Now, please, Jeff, I just want you to know, I'm not saying for one moment that the Gluteator doesn't offer any benefit beyond the leg press, some of these other movements for strength or hypertrophy. It's just an example.
Oh, no. And I totally agree with you. Now you take it to today's day and age in the gym, and glutes become an incredibly important muscle group to work, whether your intent is aesthetically or if it's actually for function. So let me I know this is off script, but let me throw this in your lap real quick. Something that was pointed out to me this week. I was privileged to a conversation, and this person has a Gluteator and has had it for multiple years now. And ironically, in their clinic, the Gluteator sits next to a digital height machine. So you can actually measure height. This individual noticed that people were a little bit taller after using the Gluteator. So what he started to notice, he's like, is it just in my brain, or is this actually happening? Does that make sense? So like so just for poops and grins, what he did was he started throwing people on the height measure, that's digital height measure, and then put them on a Gluteator, and then put them back on the digital height measure, to see what was going on. And, to his credit, you could never do this study because the validity would be ridiculous to prove, right? Because you could literally, I would never, but anybody who has a Gluteator that is using it on a regular basis, get back to me on this and see if you notice the same, because I'm open because if it's true, let's have fun with it. If it's just something, but he noticed, about 3/4 of an inch difference in height, just in terms of activating the glutes and how people stand. Now, I know postural strength very, very well. It's a topic that I enjoy, and posture doesn't change that much with strength. So to be honest with you, his results, his findings, what he believes is counterintuitive to what I understand to be true. So it was a mind-blowing conversation for me, because it wasn't something that I ever considered the Gluteator contributing to. But I want to explore it to see if it has some validity, because if that's the case, then what we're really changing is, if the glutes are activated, how does it change the way we stack our body or the way we stand? And like I said, it's completely into the discovery phase. Anyone who has a Gluteator already, please challenge this concept and either prove or disprove to see if it's working, if it does it for you as well.
Well, I don't even think that's that controversial, because, I mean, look, Jeff, at the end of the day, you're the biomechanics expert, so you know a lot more than I do. But I actually thought strength was very important for posture, and improvements in strength sort of correlated with improvements in posture. So when you explained that to me, I thought, yeah, that makes sense that the Gluteator would do that. But you seem to disagree with that from the outset, though.
No, I initially agreed with you. And then I did this thing called a literature review, and I realized that what I thought was common sense, actually what happens was, or what typically happens is, we feel like we are changing our posture, but our posture kinematically doesn't change that much. But because we have more kinetic ability, the poor posture doesn't bother us as much. So the way that I look at it after the literature review is, it's really weird way to look at it, but posture becomes a skill that you need to reinforce through cognitive correction of your body positioning. The strength doesn't naturally cause you to sit taller or stand taller or walk better or whatever happens to be. You have to gain the strength and then develop the skill of improved posture. That's my conclusion after reading more than a few articles. Fair enough? And so...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, because I didn't want that to be the conclusion. And so when I say this to you, it wasn't what I thought was going on. And then I went, wait a minute, like wrap your brain around that. So when I was given the information of the glutes contribution, this is not something, or maybe they cognitively stood taller because they realized that they were being measured. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like exactly. It's a few confounders there potentially.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the whole thing. That's why you would never get that study approved, because there's no validity. You could not do that study because it's too easy to influence the outcome. But let's just, for play devil's advocate, let's suppose that it is true. How does that change the way we move? How does that change the way we dissipate forces? The glute becomes an anchor for all of our movement, our ability to pick, push, walk, everything thereafter. At that point, I still love our contribution to the strength industry, no matter what realm. But if that holds some level of fact, yeah, it's even more than I was anticipating. Fair enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's interesting. That's quite surprising, actually. Wasn't aware of what you said there in terms of explanation following that literary review is quite interesting. So just returning briefly to programming sequences, protocols. If you had, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, Jeff, but if you had any examples of how our colleagues in high intensity training might sequence a gluteator into a workout, do you have any off the top of your head? For example, like, I don't know, gluteator into med-X leg press, into leg extension. I don't know. I'm just curious if you have any that come to mind that, some of our listeners who might have a gluteator or be looking to purchase one might get excited about sequencing in with their existing equipment.
Okay, so this is what I believe, and that's kind of what the question as it was direct. I believe that the Gluteator provides a service within the HIIT community that is difficult to address. I don't believe everyone that walks into any sort of strength situation has the capability of activating their glutes to the level that we think they are. And I've had the opportunity to work at the NFL level with highly recruited, developed athletes, and what I was privileged to in that situation was understanding that even at this elite level athlete, not everyone can fire their glutes appropriately. And so what I would do if I was a gym owner considering a purchase of the Gluteator is I would look at, am I adequately getting these glutes to fire amongst my clientele? And so I'll tell you a real quick story with the Gluteator in the NFL. The comment that was made to me personally through the strength conditioning coach was, we're tired of getting these college athletes who can squat 700 pounds and not fire their glutes. And
how do they know they're not firing their glutes?
This is what.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's a great question. And like I said, but it's one of those where these are his comments and they're not my own. I'm literally repeating what happened. And, obviously we know the glutes are contributing because we're built as human beings. And that's, they're not completely dormant, but they're not as active as they want them to be. And I'm of the belief that posterior chain strength, or weakness, I should say, posterior chain weakness through the entire system, glutes just happens to be one link, is the first place you deal with athletes for injury minimization. I think it starts with posterior chain. And so I'm of the belief that, are you activating all the muscles through the posterior chain, bottom of the feet to the back of the neck, to be able to minimize injury potential within the entire system? We just happen to, in my opinion, play a very important role and a very important link. So after this said football team had the Gluteator for 6 weeks, I believe, 4 to 6 weeks, I don't remember exactly. The phone call I received was, your machine does exactly what we hoped it would do. We now can literally determine who is not capable of acting their glutes as proficiently during the compound movements. And as they have gotten stronger with your machine, you start to see they're much more proficient in the hole, like at the bottom part of a squat. And to me, that was music in my ears. I knew that scientifically, I knew that's what was going to happen. But I've learned that my opinion as a scientist matters very little until it's practically applied to the general public or a specific strength facility, right? So now our Gluteator in the NFL is now considered a staple exercise for this one team and the several individuals, mostly linemen, who have purchased the machine after the fact. And so what we now know is that this machine is being used to activate for the purposes of transfer within the weight room and the purposes of transfer to the field. And so when you ask me the question about protocols or sequencing, mostly what I would want people to know is to understand the value of what this machine could provide to your specific clientele, who you are working with. Because once you understand that value, then the sequencing becomes, in my opinion, becomes secondary, because then you know what you have, what tool you have in your facility, and that tool can be utilized at any point during the exercise sequence to get the value that you need from it to contribute to the total programming. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
So to me, the sequencing, the sets, the reps, the load, all of that becomes secondary once you understand its value and why you are using it. So when I get a chance, so when someone buys a Gluteator, I try to connect with them and work with them as they get comfortable integrating it. So I've heard it used many, many different ways. But my favorite part is they understand the value of what it's going to do to their programming, regardless of how they plan on using, whether it's aesthetics or function or therapy or sport or, whatever it happens to be. But like, for example, probably one of my favorite conversations was with a team of powerlifters. And they realized that as they got stronger with the Gluteator, their ability to transition in the bottom part of a squat and their ability to pull the bar through their knees, which is the second pull in a deadlift, both significantly improved as a result of this additional isolated strength from this, what they call the goofy little machine they didn't anticipate working, right? And I love that conversation because they were totally against it, but they were open to trying. And sure enough, it held its own. It proved its value.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. That's really quite powerful feedback, isn't it? Really, from those groups of individuals. So I hear what you're saying. I think I understand what you mean about how the value is understanding how this machine works, and then everything else kind of becomes secondary. But I mean, I guess I know that there'll be people listening to this who, like myself, who are just excited about sequencing workouts in different ways to keep clients excited. It is part of the objective, or might be part of their objective. So have you got any views on how you might just give us one sequence? Like what have you seen in your clients where you think this is utilized really well, and in a particular lower body sequence, for example? Is there any that come to mind?
So like I said, it depends on the day and depends on the time, and because this becomes one more exercise in the process. And so, I prefer to pair this with compound movements, or I like to do it as completely an accessory day, right? Where I'm doing leg curl, leg extension, Gluteator, calf raises, or like does that make sense? Like I'm
actually really interested in how you utilize it in your own workouts. That's actually a really good place to go, I think.
So it just like last night I did legs. So I did legs. So last night was more of a compound day for me. So I used it as more of the pre-activator, that type of thing. And then would immediately, once I kind of loosened up the hips and got things, I got on a Gluteator, got the glutes activated, moved over to a squat. Let
me stop you right there. Let's get into detail, Jeff. Tell me exactly your workout, machine by machine or exercise by exercise, protocol by protocol. So for example, Gluteator, 3 or 4 reps shy of failure for activation, then next machine or whatever it is you end up doing.
Okay. So typically what I'll do is I'll sit and spin on a bike for 7 to 12 minutes, depending on, just to get some blood flow, maybe hopefully break a sweat. That I'm still proficient enough to sweat within 7 minutes. And then what I'll typically do is like an active warm up where I'm increasing range of motion through dynamic principles. And then I'll do some some sort of lunge type thing mostly to open my hips. And I'm 52 years of age, and I'm not the most mobile person I used to be. And then what I'll do is I'll typically come in, like last night I did adduction and Gluteator, and I do one set as a warm up, and I'll do one set to fatigue on each of the machines. And then we went from there to the squat rack, and
Hang on, so you did abduction into Gluteator, is that right?
adduction.
Abduction. So it's two separate machines there, right? So
adduction for the adductor.
Oh, sorry, it's squeezing inwards, right? Adduction.
Fair enough. Yeah, gotcha. And then I use the Gluteator, and the reason is because I know the adductors are highly active in deep, trying to get deep in my squats and making sure that I have that midline strength to be able to support. And then, I'm of the belief that your adductors are highly active as hip extensors, especially when you're in the bottom part of the lift. Not everybody agrees with me on that, but I'm the person that when I go real heavy on squats, my inner thighs, my groin are real sore for a couple of days. So I know darn well, my leg length and depth that I can take the squat I know they're active under those circumstances. So I've been real diligent about making sure I maintain that flexibility, mobility, and stability through that muscle group specifically. And then I'll move on to the Gluteator to get them pre-activated, as we spoke earlier, not to fatigue, but just kind of get them active. Or last night, I actually got real aggressive and took them to a level of fatigue because I wanted to. I knew I was going to keep my squats a little bit lighter and reps high last night. And then we went to a squat rack, did 3 sets, and I was picking a weight that I knew I could get at least 15 to 20 reps. I was pausing at the bottom, so I was probably doing somewhere in the ballpark of a 5-6 second rep, 2, 2, 2, and 2 in each of the phases. And then I only did 1 set of warm up, and then I did 2 sets to the level of fatigue where I could still rack the weight, but was feeling the effects. And then went to a standing single leg hamstring curl. Same intent. I had a weight on there that I knew I could get at least 12, hopefully 15 if I was feeling good about myself, proper sleep, eat, and hydration. And then I went back and did, I'm a big fan of straight leg deadlifts. It's just a personal favorite of mine. So I tried to activate the hamstring muscularly with the standing leg curls, and then eccentrically through the straight leg is just something that I prefer. Sometimes I'll do Nordics or razors instead of the straight leg, but because of the eccentric loading. But last night was just with the barbell. We had access to the rack. The gym was a little full, but we still got in there. And then from there, I think we finished with a real aggressive set of leg extensions and seated calf raises, standing calf raises, supersetted, and walked out of the gym in 40 minutes.
Nice. Awesome workout. Thank you for that, Jeff. Again, just conscious of time, and obviously I really want to get into the ankle system. So can we transition to that?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about that. So give us a little overview first.
So the concept of bidirectional resistance we took the exact same idea and we dropped it down to the ankle. And the ankle is a little more complex, is it's not one joint that moves in 2 different planes. It's a combination of joints with the intricacies of how the 2 joints stack on each other. One gives you sagittal plane movement, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, and then the other joint that is going to be more inversion, eversion. And so what the design of the machine did is it combines plantar flexion in a seated position, which is going to be more soleus oriented, with inversion. So what you're getting is opposition contraction. So you're getting soleus and tibialis anterior active at exactly the same time. It's for those who've never tried it, it's a bit strange. It's not a comfortable feeling because it's not something you've ever experienced in the weight room, to have that antagonist relationship being exploited or utilized during the same exercise. And then the other combination, it's one machine, but it has two distinct exercises. The other combination is actually dorsiflexion with eversion. And so what you do is you get the frontal compartment with the lateral compartment active at the same time. That lateral compartment, in my opinion, professionally and personally, is key to what this machine provides. And what it does, it takes those peroneal muscles and makes them active. So if you're moving, say, into basketball players or volleyball players or tennis or, court sports for sure, and then field sports probably real close second, in my opinion. What you're seeing is a tremendous amount of transfer. Now, these are not my words. These are words of people who, there's about 11 of them in the world right now. And they're everything from football players to basketball to volleyball to soccer, field turf soccer as well. So I've had the opportunity for those who have the machine to be able to work with athletes. I also have individuals who have the machine that are working with, say, stroke patients and some neurological dysfunction. So we've got a few of them out there, and with the intent of collecting anecdotal evidence of like, how are they using it? What are they using it for? Blah, blah, blah. So the dorsiflexion with eversion has proven to be incredibly valuable because it's not reproduced in a weight room. And the only time you ever really see people doing this is in either prehabilitation, which is a damn good program, or rehabilitation after the catastrophic event or injury has already occurred. So if my theory is correct, and many people believe this as well, if your peroneal or lateral compartment is strong, then you are more resilient to a preventative minimization, I guess is the right word, to that lateral ankle sprain and also the high ankle sprain, the dreaded high ankle sprain. And but like I said, once again, theoretically, I'm not going to run out and twist my ankles to see if I'm right, but I've had enough people who have the machine that have come back with that level of feedback. Like, yes, two things happen. One, our athletes we have less ankle sprains as a result, which is thrilling for us to hear. But then the best part is if the event does occur and the injury does occur, then their rehabilitation or time away from the court is significantly less. So that goes into strength training, muscle, tendon, bone, joint, ligament. It's the systems, right? That the entire orthopedic system, if you will. That's the part that's got me the most excited is, yes, we'll never prevent an injury from occurring because there's feet on basketball courts, right? There's people come under the net in volleyball, there's slide tackles in soccer. I can't go out and change those events, but if I can help you get back quicker and decrease the amount of downtime you have, I like our chances. I like our position in the game. Like, I like what we contribute. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. As you explain, I'm sitting here doing dorsiflexion and plantar flexion and inversion, eversion with my feet under the table to try and remind myself how the machine utilizes the ankle, moves the ankle. So can you just remind me, so that you gave some great examples there in terms of how this is really helpful for athletes, but you also touched on other populations, maybe the elderly, maybe those with, I think, did you say stroke risk? Just curious how this might help senior people or people who have, I don't know, challenges with balance and lower body strength.
So basically what we've learned is that if you improve your ankle stability, specifically the contribution of the plantaris to the lateral component, the lateral compartment, then what you start to see is more proficient strength contractions up the system. So the hip specifically, and then secondarily the knee, and then the ability to transfer that energy from the floor through the center of mass of the body.
Now that sounds really interesting, and I can see that being enormously valuable to a lot of the clients of strength training owners who listen to this podcast. I'm just conscious of time, Jeff, and I know that we probably want to spend a little bit more time on the torso system on another podcast. But is there anything else firstly you think that's really important to say about the ankle system or plantaris, or do you want to just give a quick overview of the torso system before we wrap up?
Let me go one more thing on the ankle, and the reason
Sure.
is I just because we knew we were going to start releasing the plantaris here within like re-releasing. We had some callbacks. There were some couple things, Eric and Mike Petrilla and the Collins boys out in England and stuff. They helped us with some of the glitches in the design, and tremendously valuable to us in providing feedback. And there was a couple things we needed to work out. One was the ratcheting system for the foot. The other was kind of the stabilization of the knees. But anyway, we've got that worked out now. And so I started reaching out to the different individuals who have the machine in addition to those three. And one of the stories that I got back was from a university that has the machine, and they work specifically with a court sport, basketball. And these are his words. I was privileged to this conversation. These are his words. He said, if you go back and look, we've had one serious ankle injury in the 2 years that we've had your ankle system. And we had that individual back on the court within a week. And to me, that was from anybody who's ever twisted their ankle significantly knows most of us are still on crutches in a week. And they had them back on the court, which gives you some indication that connective tissue, when strong, is a little more resilient, which is what we're trying to do, is make the body more efficient. And strength plays a major role in that efficiency in terms of your ability to bounce back. And this is how he said it to me. We roll your machine out for every basketball practice, and every athlete on the team knows that they will do their work on your machine during practice, somehow, some way, whether it's during or before, but everyone's going to spend the time. And this is how they use it. We have a handle on the machine that you can utilize for improved mobility of the joint. And then they get mobility first, and then they start to add strength, i.e. stability. And then the combination of the two, the increased range of motion, in addition to the improved lateral compartment stability and the soleus tibialis anterior combination, improves how you keep your knee above the ankle, and also are able to take it into extreme dorsiflexion. That alone right there, in my opinion, if you go pull 20 videos on an ACL tear on, say, a volleyball court or basketball court, you will notice that the first thing that starts to happen is how the ankle actually contributed to why the knee took up so much force. And so when we start looking at improving mobility, adding stability, we don't think we're just minimizing ankle injury potential. We also think that we start going up the kinetic chain, that this will start to, this is a very strong statement, but we think we are going to contribute to how the ACL knee injury industry starts to kind of evolve as well, in terms of, by adding this strength above and below the joint, gluteator and plantaris, that might help with minimizing or controlling that knee a little bit better. And so to me, the ankle, the hip are interrelated, and the benefit will be the knee. That is how I'm looking at that now going forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How exciting, right? Having an impact on that particular industry, and that the prevalence of those types of knee injuries. Jeff, this has been awesome as always. And I think, we'll certainly have links to the torso system in the show notes of this. So if people want to learn more about that, they've got a great video demo from Skylar or Tanner on your website, and then they can certainly do that. And we'll certainly book another episode to talk about that in more depth. What is the best way for people to find out more about the machines? Where should we send people?
Probably the easiest way is just to go on our website, which is www.dynavecmd. The MD stands for multidirectional.com. And then probably where we get the most amount of traffic is through our Instagram. We're very active on Instagram. It's just the @ symbol with DynavecMD. And I'm active on both. If you contact us, either go through either one. It's me you'll be speaking to. Our email address is dynavec@outlook.com. which is another way to just directly say, hey, listen, I listened to you on, HIIT business and high intensity business. And so you can just email me directly and I'll absolutely positively get back to you. And if I don't, just shoot me another one, call me a bad name, and we'll go from there. But no,
always get back to your customers, Jeff, or your prospects.
I always do. But I say that smiling because yesterday I overlooked somebody and it was my fault. And that's why I'm kind of making fun of myself, because I said that. And then I realized yesterday I had one of those days where I neglected it. And so anyway, long story short, but
we'll do it. We'll do it. Absolutely. Go on. Sorry.
And then probably those are the three best ways to reach out. Even if you're just remotely interested, or if you want to talk strength programming, or if there's something that you and I spoke about today that you want to follow up on, I love those conversations.
Awesome. That's one of the things I love about you, Jeff, is that you are very open to being challenged and you enjoy those types of conversations. And I always get the feeling that you enjoy them because you're learning something. And I think more of us need to be like that. It's sometimes not natural to be like that. And you have to almost learn to be a little bit more like that. But it's just a better way to be. And for everyone listening to this podcast, please go to highintensitybusiness.com to download 2 free PDF transcripts by Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson on how to attract and retain excellent trainers, which I know is a common challenge in our industry. And to find the show notes for this particular episode, please go to episode and search, on highintensitybusiness.com, episode 325. And until next time, thank you very much for listening.